We're here, and I'm David Ingram. The program is Ingram, and we're talking to Dr. Tom Godwin, who wrote this book right here called Doctor's Notes, and a tale taken from both sides of the bed sheets. I think that's a good deal, and I've known of Tom Godwin because, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I guess, you did what, open heart surgery, triple bypass or something on my old good friend?
No, I was the doctor that did the heart catheterization.
The heart catheterization.
Yeah, that's just where you do an angiogram, inject dye down to the coronary artery, see where the blocks are, and then poor old Tom went off for his 3-vessel bypass.
Yeah, it was a triple bypass.
Yeah, he was just an excellent patient.
I'm talking about Dr. Thomas DeRoos, Tom DeRoos, who was such a dear friend of mine. We actually were in business together down in St. Vincent and Grenada in the Caribbean in a 102-foot boat called the Dana, which was a Baltic trader. And he introduced me to, who did he introduce? Eric Gary, the Prime Minister of Grenada. And Eric Gary introduced me to Morris Bishop, and Morris Bishop introduced me to a guy named Bud Court. Now, just to put it into context, if you remember, Eric Gary, do you know who, what's his name, Peter Warren was, who was on CKNW as a talk show host for a while? No?
Yes, that name sounds familiar.
He was doing the weekend stuff. He used to be the daily.
Yeah.
Eric Gary was up in Winnipeg visiting Peter Warren when Morris Bishop, my lawyer, and Tom DeRoos's lawyer.
Yes.
Tom DeRoos's lawyer, really. I was just a little wee piece of this thing. He was the big part of it. And Morris Bishop overthrew Eric Gary. So this is the old days. He sent a telegram to Winnipeg, where Eric Gary had just come from speaking at the United Nations and then came to Winnipeg for Christmas with... anyway, Morris Bishop, the lawyer, overthrew the Prime Minister. And then 6 or 7 or 8 months later or so, Bud Court, and then Bud Court took over the legal work for the charter boat. And I know this is supposed to be your book, but this is a good story because you know Tom, and this is so good, it's so fun. And then Bud Court, who was the law partner of Morris Bishop, he didn't like Morris Bishop's style of government, so he overthrew Morris Bishop and executed him. And Bud Court became the Prime Minister of Grenada. And then Ronald Reagan, who I had met when he was governor of California, because I had an office in Beverly Hills, Ronald Reagan was now the President of the United States, and he didn't like this Bud Court guy, Prime Minister of Grenada, and the airport was wide open with drug runners running airplanes. So he sent in the U.S. Marines, and the U.S. Marines, if you remember, captured Bud Court. And the whole thing was just a hoot. And all that because you saved Tom DeRoos's life? No, not quite. That was before the heart problems. But
yeah, that's right.
Did you know that Tom had such an interesting life and was involved with all those guys and so on?
I did. I knew a little bit about that, but he also had an interesting World War II life too.
Oh yeah, he was just a great sailor, a great doctor, and a great sailor.
Yeah.
So you wrote this book, and you've done one of these people who are embarrassed to be public, because you're not a very public person, really, are you?
No.
Yeah, embarrassed to be public. So just for the record, all profits from the book, every single cent of it?
Well, yeah, all my
profits, all your profits from the book goes to the Royal Columbian Hospital?
Yes.
And you were there from what, about?
Oh, I started there in 1968.
68.
And I was there till 96, and then I was sick as a dog, and I had to retire. So that was my history at the hospital.
So you retired from the hospital, but you're flying a little airplane around.
Well, yeah, I developed a non-Hodgkin's, a rare type of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and I felt okay, but I was losing power in my legs and my left arm, and they put me on a ton of chemotherapy, and then I was really sick.
I can imagine.
But the good thing was I learned how to type, because people in my generation, males in my generation, didn't know how to type. So when I was sick, I bought one of those Mavis Beacon typing discs.
Oh, did you?
And I learned how to type. You know, it's sort of a game. I was pretty depressed and very sick, 30 pounds lighter than I am now, covered in bruises and a bad rash. But anyway, I learned how to type. And then when the chemo started helping me and the side effects wore off, I thought I better get off my butt and get this book organized, because I started taking notes in 1976, because when I finished medical school in 1961, by 1976, 15 years later, I'd seen so many changes in cardiology. I thought someone has to document this. And so I systematically kept notes. And when I recovered basically from my chemo, and now I had my new typing skill, I decided to put this all together and make this book.
Well, as you know, I have not read the book because you woke me up phoning saying you were... Well, that's fine. I mean, I'm not supposed to be sleeping in the middle of the afternoon. And I said, come on over so that we could do this. I have read parts of it, and the excerpts I've read have been pretty fancy. And Belle Puri, you've got, did you a real honor in the...
Yeah. Oh, yeah, she's very nice. Yeah.
And I like Belle. I think she's got a good opinion. And you've got so many fellow doctors that have said this is important. So let's talk about you and what somebody can find, because the person behind things, what I understand is, and as I say, Tom DeRoos talked about you way back when. I don't know why particularly, except that I remember you from Tom DeRoos. And then David Hancock, who's absolutely one of the finest guys that I've ever known. And here's the book right here. We were looking for Squandering Billions. And you can see usually when I do a book and I'm going to talk to the author, it's got all sorts of little things here. Because your book also talks about a lot of things that are wrong with the medical system.
Yes,
and that's what this book does.
Yes, yes.
And that's what the movie Sicko does.
Yes, yes.
So that's Squandering Billions. Also a Hancock's book.
Yes.
And did he give you one of those?
Yes, I have one.
You've got one, so you've read that one too. And David, of course, did books on eagles and so on, and he's published many, many, many books on eagles, and I've gone out with him tromping the Arctic tundra and the Northwest Territories and the Yukon Territories and northern BC up in places like Atlin and so on the top of... Have you been to the top of Canoe Mountain with David?
No. But I've been to all those places you mentioned.
Yeah. Well, with David or
no,
just on your own?
With different people, yeah. Even with my little, I have a home-built aircraft.
Yes.
And I've been right up to Tuktoyaktuk.
Oh, you went to Tuktoyaktuk?
Yeah, I had to go there, and I went to all the way over to northern Saskatchewan, and I was at, I guess, every bar in between.
Every bar in between. So you got to have muskox, and you got to have a few other things like Arctic char, and...
Yeah, oh yeah.
Did you make it to Arctic Red River by any chance?
I don't think so.
Arctic Red River is...
But I ate muskox.
Yeah. Arctic Red River, when David Hancock and I drove, it's right at the junction of the highway, the Dempster Highway, and the Mackenzie River, and you have to cross over it when you're going into the Northwest Territories, and there's this little village that's got about 16 houses, and it has a garbage dump that's half a mile long, and it's got hundreds of cars in it that have just been abandoned over all the years. And when David and I were there with that old beat-up green Suburban that he's got, you know, the 5-door Suburban, we needed a hood spring and we needed a right front drive shaft or something for the four-wheel drive.
Yes.
And we just sort of wandered through this plethora of vehicles finding parts.
Yeah.
And they're just there because they've just been abandoned. They're abandoned stuff. But when we went into town, there was a hillside. And we're just driving into town, and there's this hillside there. And suddenly, the whole hillside erupted because there were like 64 dogs, I think I counted, sled dogs. This is in the summer. This is in August. And there's all these sled dogs that are chained.
They're all chained up at parts. They can't fight.
That's right. And they're all chained apart, and they're all just living on this hill.
Yeah.
And you don't see them when you're just driving up because they're all lying down, and suddenly they're all up and barking at you, and it's an experience and a half.
I know. Yeah.